What if I told you that our society is in the middle of a loneliness epidemic, but the people who are suffering the most aren't who you think they are? Today, we're going to dive into this really surprising paradox and look at the powerful science behind a pretty simple solution: intergenerational connection. Seriously, it's a link that could not only change our individual lives, but maybe even transform our entire society. So let's break it down. Okay, just take a second here and really think about it. If you had to put money on it, which age group would you say feels the most isolated? Go ahead, make a guess. The answer is probably not what you're thinking. Okay, so check this out. The data from the Social Connection in America report, it reveals something pretty fascinating. We often have this image in our heads of loneliness mainly being a problem for the elderly, but the numbers, they tell a completely different story. As you look at this breakdown by age, a really surprising trend starts to emerge. 53%. A staggering 53% of young adults, we're talking 18 to 34-year-olds, report feeling lonely. That is more than half, and it's almost double the rate of people aged 65 and older. So what this really tells us is that our basic assumptions about who's disconnected, they're just plain wrong. And this isn't just some social trend, it's actually baked right into our biology. To really get why so many of us feel disconnected, we've got to look at how we're wired. Because at our core, we humans are creatures built for social connection. I want you to think of your brain as this gigantic social network. It's made up of billions of neurons that are all sending signals to each other across this tiny little space called a synapse gap. And if everything lines up just right, boom, a connection is made. While our social lives work exactly the same way. We are constantly sending out these little signals, just looking to connect with someone else. Okay, so if we're all hardwired to connect, then what's stopping us? What's getting in the way? What happens when that signal gets blocked? Well, the main culprit here is stigma. It acts kind of like plaque, building up and getting in the way, preventing that electrical signal from jumping across the gap. It's a physical block to our natural biological drive to connect with each other. And this stigma, it works in two ways. First, there's internalized stigma, that little voice inside our own heads that creates self-doubt. It's the voice that says things like, "Ugh, I walk too slowly," or "I don't want to be a burden." And then there's outside stigma, which is all about the judgments we put onto others. Ugh, boomers, they think they know everything, or they're so out of touch. Both of these are incredibly corrosive to connection. So the big question is, how do we clear away all that plaque? How do we get the signals firing again? This is where the solution gets really, really cool. Because it's not about fixing people. It's about changing the entire environment. This comic just lays it out so perfectly. It shows how older adults have what it calls a dense neural forest, a whole lifetime of experience and wisdom. And at the same time, younger people have a growing neural forest, one that's flexible and really good at navigating all the new challenges we face today. See, when they connect, they don't cancel each other out. They actually complement each other. And this is the most important part. When older adults can guide with their experience and younger people can help us understand the world we're in today, we start working together to adjust the entire chemistry of connection. We don't fix people, we change the environment. Okay, that sounds amazing, right? A total game changer. But what does it actually look like in the real world? How do we start making those changes on a bigger scale? Well, the good news is there's actually a national roadmap for this. The U.S. Surgeon General has released a whole strategy to tackle this epidemic of loneliness and isolation head on. And it's this really big, comprehensive plan that's built on 6 key pillars. The whole idea is to intentionally rebuild the social fabric of our country, piece by piece. Let's just take a quick look at these. So Pillar 1 is all about strengthening our social infrastructure. That means investing in places like parks and libraries where people can just meet. Pillar 2 is about pro-connection public policies, like making public transportation more accessible so people can get out and be part of their communities. Then you've got Pillar 3, which is about mobilizing the health sector, so maybe doctors start screening for loneliness like they do for other health risks. Pillar 4 is a huge one, reforming our digital world to actually prioritize healthy, real connection instead of just engagement. Pillar 5 is about deepening our knowledge with more research. And finally, Pillar 6 ties it all together by building a culture that truly values connection in our schools, our jobs, and our neighborhoods. Look, I know a national strategy with 6 whole pillars can sound huge, a little overwhelming, right? But it's so important to remember that every thriving community, Every strong friendship, every single one of these big ideas, they're all built from the exact same simple foundation. It all starts with one person reaching across that gap to make one connection. So, as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with a direct question. Thinking about that dense forest of experience and that growing forest of new ideas, what is one connection? It can be big, it can be small. What's one connection that you will try to build today?